Good afternoon. We're thrilled today to welcome Chef de Cuisine of the French Laundry. He's been hard at work the last few months putting the finishing touches on his new restaurant, Benu, which is set to open later this summer. Corey started his career at the age of 17 at Blue Ribbon Sushi in New York, in the dining room actually, but he soon discovered that his passion and skills were better suited for the kitchen. Since then, he has worked for some of the greatest restaurants in the world and eventually landed in the French Laundry in 2001. He spent a year opening Per Se, Thomas Keller's restaurant in New York as well. And while he was at the French Laundry, the restaurant was the only one to receive 3 Michelin stars when the guide first launched in California in 2006. That same year, he also won the Rising Chef Award from the James Beard Foundation. He also co-authored Under Pressure, which I believe is actually on sale on that little table, and you can sort of purchase a copy after the talk, which documented many of the techniques and recipes that he developed during his time at the French Laundry and Per Se. I also took the liberty of Googling a few fun facts about Corey. He is the sort of ambassador, the cultural ambassador of Cuisine for Seoul, I believe. His guilty pleasure is American Chinese food. And one night, and you'll have to tell me if this story is correct or if Google is incorrect here, but one night after work, he was searching his fridge for food, found bacon, spinach, and eggs, and the next day he developed a new dish for the French Laundry. So without further ado, I'm sure you haven't heard enough of my speaking, and let's hear Corey give his talk.
Thank you. I started working in restaurants right after I graduated high school, and that was in 1995. I was 17 years old, so I've been working in restaurants for 15 years. And when you work as a chef in a professional kitchen, you work a lot of hours, 14, 15, 16 hours a day, so it's very easy to kind of lose touch with the world outside of the restaurant. And certainly for me, it was always a challenge keeping up with current events, and especially when it comes to technology. The advancement is so quick and the world is changing at such a rapid pace that it's hard to keep up. And I think for me, Google is a really good example of that, where I didn't see the development and I just kind of woke up one day and it was everywhere. I mean, it's this world phenomenon. It just kind of happened overnight for me. And so when Cynthia asked me to come down here and talk about my experience at the French Laundry and plans for opening a new restaurant, I'd never heard of this event that you guys do, this Talks at Google, Authors at Google, and I wasn't really sure if you guys would find any of that interesting, So Cynthia assured me that a lot of chefs have been here in the past, like Alice Waters, Ferran Adria, Thomas Keller, and that was really daunting for me because these are like culinary icons, and internationally recognized chefs. So I decided to go online and research a little bit about this event that you guys do, hoping to find something that would give me a little more confidence to come down here. So I Googled Authors at Google, Talks at Google, and I saw like Salman Rushdie come up, Condoleezza Rice, and President Obama, and I was not exactly the kind of reassurance I was looking for, but anyway, I mustered up enough bravado to come down here, and I'm really glad I did because seeing the campus is really amazing, and being able to see it firsthand is, I think, a pretty unique opportunity. And it certainly confirmed my suspicion that you guys are going to take over the world. And probably one of the biggest mistakes I ever made was selling my Google stock a couple years ago. So anyway, I'm really happy to be here, so thanks for having me. I'm just going to talk a little bit about what I'm working on now, which is opening a new restaurant in San Francisco. And, opening a restaurant is something that happens all the time. I mean, you go to new restaurants all the time, but I don't think there's a lot of information out there about what the process is about or what's involved in opening a new place. And so I just want to talk a little bit about that. I think I should qualify that by saying each restaurant is different, and the deal and the structure of that business is unique. For me, when I talk about the process I went through, the first thing I had to do is really acknowledge how many people in our industry came out and offered their guidance and their support. People like Michael Mina, who I think he has 16 restaurants now. And I've never worked with him. I've met him a few times, but he reached out to me and said, hey, anything you need, introduced me to his real estate broker to help me find a space, offered his kitchen when I was prepping for events, helped me staff when I was no longer at the French Laundry. So it's pretty amazing. I mean, he did that just to be collegial. And, or people like Grant Achatz and Nick Kokonis at Alinea, who really shared with me the process they went through in opening that restaurant. And I learned an enormous amount from them. And then there were just so many people out there, people like David Chang, Dan Barbara, Daniel Blood, who whenever we needed something, right away, sure, whatever you need. And I think that kind of camaraderie is really special. And then, of course, there's Thomas Keller, who was there for me and supported me long before I ever decided to open a restaurant of my own. I started working for Thomas, Cynthia said, in 2001. I spent some time in New York opening Per Se. And I came back to the French Laundry, and I've been the chef de cuisine there until last summer, July of last summer. That restaurant is a very special place, especially for me. I mean, I kind of grew up there. I started there when I was very young. I spent basically my entire 20s working at the French Laundry. So it was certainly a difficult decision to leave and try to do something of my own. But once I made that decision, I think there's really no looking back. And I started to think about it very seriously in 2008. That's when I told Thomas I wanted to do something. And at that time, I really had I had nothing. I didn't have investors, I didn't have partners, I didn't have a prospectus. I didn't even know how you go about doing that. And actually, the first place I looked at, the first commercial space I looked at to rent, was on September 15th, 2008. And that was the day that Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy. And so, here I am, this young chef wanting to open a new fine dining restaurant, and we're in the middle of one of the worst economic climates ever. It's not really the best time to go out on your own and try to raise money to open a restaurant. But in hindsight, and I'm not really sure why, I never really lost confidence, and certainly a lot of that had to do with the support I had from Thomas and my colleagues. And sure enough, we got an offering together, and I met a great group of people who would become my core partners, and together we formed an entity that would own and operate the restaurant. And then what we did was we took a small portion of that entity and divided that into really small shares and offered it to various people in the Bay Area, and people in a variety of fields like law, finance, tech, hospitality. And what that did was that allowed us to have a network of partners who would bring clients and promote the restaurant and talk about it from their respective industries. So now we have a really great group of partners in the restaurant. The name of the restaurant is Benu. And I'm not sure how many of you have tried naming something, whether it's a child or a new business, but it's a really, really difficult thing to do. And I certainly agonized over it. And I flipped through encyclopedias, read through dictionaries and, different languages, looked for a name in songs and poems. But it was a really difficult process. But once I found Benu, there was really no looking back. For me, Benu has kind of a playful name sound to it, like a cartoon character. But it also, you can't identify where it's from. It's hard to know where the origin of that name is. Some people think it sounds French. Some people think it sounds Japanese. It's actually an Egyptian word. It's the Egyptian equivalent of the phoenix bird that stands for rebirth and renewal and longevity. And certainly those things are things you identify with when you start something new, a new business. And longevity is certainly something that you hope to achieve in a new business. So we could really relate to it on many different levels. Once we got the name, it was coming up with the design or the logo for the name, because I think that's a really important thing. Often that's your first impression of the restaurant. For guests, it kind of sets the tone for their experience long before they get there. And for a lot of the staff, it sets the tone for the work environment before they start working there. So that was an important thing. And to do that, we collaborated with a designer in LA named Andrea Leonardo Madden. And she's a very creative and thoughtful designer. She has a small studio in West Hollywood called the Alm Project. And we emailed back and forth for months. We sent each other pictures, ideas. And through all that communication, she extracted a common thread, which was an importance placed on a process. So it wasn't just about the end result of something or the end logo, it was the process we went through to get there. And so this is the logo, and it's actually 6 different fonts And you can see that coming together. And what that does is that generates a seventh font, which is the gray, and that's the common area that they share. And so in that, it's alluding to a process like cooking where you take many different ingredients, you combine them, and you're creating a new flavor or something new, but you're still maintaining the integrity and the identity of each individual ingredient. And this process of going through that really helped me define the concept of the restaurant, and it even helped me pick the location and what kind of building it should be in. Because it's one thing to have it conceptualized in your mind, but when you start talking about it aloud and answering questions, it helps you realize it in a really different way. The building is actually located in the Soma area of San Francisco, and it's a very interesting area because there's so much modern development. The building itself is a historic building built in the early 1900s, but it's surrounded by the Four Seasons, the SF MoMA, Yerba Buena Center, Jewish Art Museum, all this residential development. So it's this historical little place that's surrounded by a lot of modernity, which is very interesting. To design the place, we worked with an architect in New York who specializes in restaurants. His name is Richard Block. Richard and I first met in New York when I was there opening Per Se, and he was designing Masa Takayama's restaurant next door in the Time Warner Center. Have you guys heard of Masa Takayama? He's a pretty renowned sushi chef. And when you go to his restaurant in New York, the second you walk in, you're in another world. You're not in New York anymore. You're not in the Time Warner building anymore. You're in this experience that's been crafted for you, and it's really special. And a big part of that is the interior design. And so I was an admirer of Richard's work long before we ever worked together. Together we designed the restaurant, and it's I think a comfortable, warm restaurant that's modern. There's some accents of luxury, but it's not about opulence. It's really about kind of an understated elegance, a little more subtle. Now, when you decide to open a restaurant or you do any kind of remodel, you definitely need an architect. I mean, that's essential. But what I was really surprised at was that we needed to work with a lot of other designers as well. And part of that is because we did so many things that were custom. And that was really important for me because I wanted to offer an experience that was unique. And that was tied into the food, the porcelain, the tabletops, the materials used in the dining room. And in order to do that and offer a whole experience, you have to do a lot of custom things. Another designer that we worked with is a man named Jung Bae Yi, and he has a studio in San Diego called Blue Oculus. And he's a designer who really understands how to balance aesthetics and function. And together we designed a few tabletop pieces. Now, when you're dealing with tabletop pieces, it can't just be about the aesthetic value of it because you're interacting with these things. These pieces have specific functions, so it's really important to balance the two, and he's someone who really understands that. One of the things we worked on was a utensil rest. And a utensil rest seems like a pretty easy thing, right? It's just a piece that flatware sits on top of. But when we start to develop it, we explored so many different concepts, and you can see a few of them here. We worked with different shapes, different materials. Some were actually really, really elaborate, but we kept coming back to something a little more simple. And this is kind of the shape we started to work on. And this is something that's very natural. It's not geometric. It's something you'd find in nature. You'd find something beautiful just by itself in nature. Maybe it's like a river stone that's very smooth from years of water running through it. So once we decided on the shape, we started just playing around and looking at different materials, different colors. And this is a mock-up of that piece. And then we worked on the scale of it, how it would look with the different pieces of flatware. And then we finally decided on the material, which was wood. And then we tried different kinds of wood. And then finally we settled on African blackwood, which is a very, very dense wood that's often used for musical instruments, and you can see that there. But the grain of the wood is really beautiful, and the feel is really smooth. It's like satin. And our tabletops are this charcoal, ash, earthy color, and that, with the dark wooden utensil rest, it makes for a very natural backdrop to the food and for the flatware. And you can see that being marked, and the silver just kind of pops up at you. Another huge collaboration regarding design that we did was for porcelain. And I feel really fortunate to have had this opportunity because I think it's rare for chefs to design their own porcelain. And what you can do is come up with specific shapes and pieces that are really tailored for the kind of food that you're serving. For this, we collaborated with a designer, a Korean porcelain maker named Kwang Ji-oh, and they're kind of an iconic manufacturer in Korea. Being Korean myself, I knew about their company and their pieces from when I was very young, and I always associated with something very fine food, fine cuisine. So I visited the factory a few years ago, and I saw some of the most beautiful pieces, and it was really on par with Maizen from Germany or some of the great houses in France. And I knew that when I opened a restaurant, I'd want some of those pieces included. And then when we started working on Menu, I contacted them and asked if there was an opportunity to collaborate on design, and basically we just started working on it right away. So you can see some of these pictures. These are some of the prototypes and samples we worked on. And then in this picture, you can see some of the final pieces that we're going to manufacture. There's basically 4 concepts. There's the white transparent glaze, there's the white matte, there's the black matte, and then there's the celadon. So those are some of the pieces there and the different shapes. And then we also worked on technical patterns. So this is a cloche with turtle shells and lily pads. And the one on top is sea urchin shells. And that could be something that's used to cloche a dish that's based on sea urchin. So it completes the dish. It's not just about the food, but the porcelain and the serving piece as well. This one here is a hand etching of a lobster. I don't know if you can see that, if you can make that out, but there's basically an etching of a lobster, and that could be used in conjunction with a dish that's centered around lobster. This one is black truffle and melanosporum, and this is actually one that I'm particularly fond of because my mother did the design for that. The artists in Korea had never seen a black truffle, and we don't have black truffles in Korea, so when they were asked to paint one, I mean, they had no idea what they were painting, so my mother helped, and we worked on that piece. But again, this is a cloche that can be used for a dish that's centered around black truffles. And this dish is actually a black truffle custard that's made with a puree of black truffles, and it fills a cavity in the bottom of a bowl that's meant to hold that custard. So it holds about 60 grams of custard, and on top is a broth. And for me, the combination of a bouillon with a custard is one of the great texture combinations that are out there. And so this dish was specifically designed for that. The other thing you see on that dish up top is, well, for lack of a better word, it's kind of a sustainable shark's fin. Does everyone know what shark's fin is and how that's harvested? Being a chef and being Asian, I can certainly appreciate the culinary and cultural value of shark's fin, but it definitely presents some moral and ecological concerns. So what I wanted to do was develop a dish or a technique that was an homage to shark's fin, and it was with that tradition in mind, but not actually use the fin itself. The interesting thing about shark's fin, even though it's something that's very revered, I mean, it's something that was cooked since I think the Ming Dynasty. It's a very luxurious ingredient. It's often served at celebratory events like a wedding. The interesting thing is it's all about texture. That's really what makes it unique. And the texture is simultaneously brittle and elastic and gelatinous all at the same time, and that's something that's very rare. But the actual flavor comes from whatever stock it's cooked in, or the bouillon that it's served with, or the sauce that it's prepared with. So the flavor I knew I could get because it's not coming from the shark fin. For this particular dish, I based it on a very traditional Cantonese preparation, like a soup supreme, and that's made with chicken and Jinhua ham, or kind of Chinese ham, aromatics, and then it's stewed together, and usually the shark fin is braised in that. For this dish, we actually added some truffle peelings so that we can tie in the truffle flavor to that dish as well. And also, it's an interpretation of that classic dish. So we had the stock, and now I was finding the texture. Have you guys heard of hydrocolloids? Hydrocolloids. It's something that's used pretty commonly. Lately, it's been used in kind of the fine dining realm. If you haven't heard of hydrocolloids, you might have heard of some of the dishes that are made possible using that. These days, you see like spheres everywhere, like liquid raviolis, whether they're gel or in the shape of a sphere, or if they're something that's liquid in the center and they explode and you bite into them. And if you haven't had that or heard of that, I'm sure you've had salad dressing from a supermarket. It's kept emulsified and the herbs are kept evenly dispersed using various hydrocolloids, or it's used in ice cream to prevent crystallization, so you get a better mouthfeel, or gummy bears. Anyway, they're kind of everywhere. And the manufacturer of one of these hydrocolloids, or many of these hydrocolloids actually, is a company called CP Kelco, and they're based in San Diego. And there's 3 people there that I've been working with for a few years now. There's a team that's comprised of Henry Monty, Ted Russin, and Amy Wong, and they've come up to the restaurant, given lectures, and we worked together on learning how to use all these various things. And so on one of our research trips down to San Diego, when I was working with them in the lab, we worked on replicating the texture of shark's fin, and we went through many tests, and it was a series of trial and error, but we finally got a texture that is really similar. Almost, it's hard to separate shark fin from this. So I'll take you through this dish. It starts with that broth I was telling you about, which is the chicken, the ham, truffle, and it's all stewed together. And then to that broth, we add a combination of hydrocolloids, and we put it into a squeeze bottle and squeeze it into a water bath with calcium, and it's the reaction between the two that's causing it to gel. And we do it in the squeeze bottle because the round shape resembles the shape of the shark fin, or the individual strands of the shark fin. And then you can see in here that we've achieved kind of that elasticity and the gelatinous quality of shark fin. And then you can see in this picture that we've also achieved the kind of the brittleness of shark fin. And for those of you who've had this in the past, if you look at it with the transparency and the color, it's really identical to shark fin. So let's see. Okay, this is the bowl with the cavity where that holds the custard, the truffle custard, and then that gets baked and then set. And then once it's set, we plate the rest of the dish on it, and that's Dungeness crab, and then the shark fin with some of the braising aromatics and ham. And then we serve this with some of the broth, some of that chicken and ham broth. That was the base for the shark fin itself. So that's pretty much it. Well, thank you very much for having me. It was really a pleasure to come down here. I think Cynthia is going to have some Q&A. Is that right?
So the floor is open to questions. Because we only have one mic, I'll just have to repeat the question for the benefit of YouTube audience as well as our VC offices. So if there's a question, just please raise your hand. Yes.
When are you opening your restaurant?
When are you opening your new restaurant?
Well, we're in construction right now. And I'm not sure if anyone's ever remodeled a house or been involved in any kind of construction. It's one of those things that, sure, we have a target date. We're supposed to get the space back in the end of June. But we fully understand that there could be some construction delays, and that's perfectly normal. But we're shooting for midsummer.
What are the cross streets again?
It's on the corner of Howard and Hawthorne.
Google Maps.
Any other questions?
Are you making reservations now?
The question was, are you taking reservations now?
No, actually, the last thing you want to do, the worst thing is to accept reservations and not be able to honor them. So we'll actually open the book up a month before we open, once we get the space back.
I think I saw a question there, yes?
Those were really nicely done videos and photography. Is this general publicity that you've prepared, or were you planning to use it for other reasons? Have you thought about posting it online for free publicity?
The question was about the very nicely prepared videos and whether that was going to be available free for publicity.
Well, we actually took those videos in my apartment last week for this presentation. So we're not that organized yet. Right. No, but it's I think that these days certainly website is a huge part of a restaurant, and it's a preview of the restaurant. Before you go and invest time and money into a restaurant, usually you check out the website and see what it's about. So certainly it was part of that development. I'm sure maybe some of these images might show up on the website, but really we just did it for you guys.
Yes, question?
Are you able to talk about the menu yet?
Are you able to talk about the menu yet?
Sure, absolutely. The concept is there'll be two menus, a tasting menu and a la carte menu. And the tasting menu will change whenever it needs to, whether it's based on availability or just being inspired to change it. It's not going to change. It's not going to change on a schedule, and it'll be a full experience, a kind of an elaborate tasting menu, anywhere from 9 to 14 courses, and the number of courses are going to change as well, because it's not really about the number of courses that's important. It's about the experience as a whole. Sometimes it takes 14 courses for me to deliver a certain experience. Sometimes it's 8, sometimes it's 9. It's not really about that, but it's a long experience. The other one is an a la carte menu, and there'll be different sections where you can choose how you want to dine. So there'll be fish and shellfish, meat, poultry, salads, soups, appetizers, and you can decide how you want to eat, how much you want to eat, and how long you want to eat for. So that, and I think having both of those are important. I think certainly in the fine dining realm, we've gotten away from the a la carte menu, and we've kind of been doing the tasting menu. But I think an a la carte menu, especially for a new restaurant and a young chef, it's important to make that restaurant accessible and approachable, and let people come in and try it out. And it also makes the restaurant not just a special occasion restaurant, where they can come back for a dish they've had already, or they can come back and have a couple courses and go out. It just makes the restaurant a little more relevant.
I think I saw at the back there.
And I jumped in sort of midstream, so I apologize if I missed this earlier. First of all, thanks for coming. It's great to see you here. Favorite restaurants either in the San Francisco Bay Area or sort of the country more broadly? I heard inspiration a little bit from Grand Matalinea, from Momofuku, but are there other favorites of yours?
The question was favorite restaurants.
Well, that's that's kind of a loaded question because you have a lot of friends out there. But certainly in the Napa Valley, living up there, there's a restaurant called Red. It's owned by Richard Renton, who's a close friend of mine. And for me, sitting at the bar and having some bar food there is something I used to do very regularly, and something I look forward to. But there are just so many great restaurants in America, and the pace at which restaurants are improving is really astonishing. And there's great restaurants all over the country. There's certainly the ones that I think are leaders, restaurants like Alinea, that are actually breaking new ground and redefining what the eating experience is about. But there's also restaurants that are very traditional and kind of the vanguard for a certain style of cuisine, and that's very important as well. But I mean, to answer your question, I mean, there's just so many out there. Yeah.
Yes, question in the front.
Did you consider wine pairing when you designed your menu?
The question was whether Corey considered wine pairing when designing the menu.
Well, actually, there's sommeliers who work on that, and our restaurant is definitely a food-driven restaurant. There are wine-driven restaurants, and wine is certainly a huge part of the experience. And I think more than specific dishes, I think it's important to make sure that your wine, your cuisine, is a style of cuisine that's compatible with wine. And sometimes it's not even wine; it could be other beverages too. But being able to offer something that's compatible with wine is an important consideration. Many people come to a restaurant and they want, again, the full experience. And it's not just about the food that's prepared in the kitchen, but it's the wine, it's the interior, it's the service, and all those things have to work in harmony.
Yes, question at the front.
Are you planning on having cocktail offerings as well?
The question was whether there's a plan to offer cocktail offerings.
We're going to be a wine-focused restaurant, and there's many reasons for that. I think that for the style of food that we do, wine just works better than high alcohol spirits or distilled spirits. And the other thing is we don't have a traditional bar. We have, it's not a place where you go and you can have one course at the bar. You can do that at the table, but it's not really at the bar. But it's really about what kind of beverages work best with the food that we serve, and it comes down to lower alcohol beverages like wine, sake.
I think I saw a question in the white coat there.
What are your favorite go-tos for comfort food?
Favorite go-tos for comfort food?
Comfort food. Certainly, Asian food is a big part for me, and comfort food is, I think, just what you grew up eating in your house. I think that's the ultimate comfort food. For me, I haven't lived with my parents in such a long time that those were kind of rare opportunities. So sometimes I'm forced to eat the American Chinese food that Cynthia was referring to. But comfort food, my favorite comfort food, I like fried chicken. I mean, I think that's a winner every time. But there's just so much good food out there. But it's really simple one-pot dishes, whether it's a stew or ragu, something that doesn't take a lot of time to prepare. So that chicken soup that you saw us doing, I mean, that's a meal in itself. Some good root vegetables and a nice chicken and some ham. I mean, that could be a meal.
I think I saw another question there.
Would you consider other locations like Napa and New York, and why did you choose San Francisco?
The question was whether he considered other locations and why he chose San Francisco.
I actually did consider one of those locations you mentioned, which was New York. I lived in New York for many years. The family that I have in the States live in New York. And at first it was something I went back and forth on. But ultimately I chose San Francisco because I've been working in the Bay Area for many years now, and I've developed relationships with great purveyors. And it was hard to justify losing those relationships to go to New York. And then also working at the French Laundry, I developed a rapport with a lot of our guests who are in the Bay Area. So it was, it was hard to justify losing that client base just to go to New York. But ultimately, I think that San Francisco is a smaller community of restaurants. And New York they have so many wonderful restaurants. And restaurants open and close, throughout the year, and you don't even hear about it. But in San Francisco, I think there's more of an opportunity to make an impact in the landscape of restaurants and be part of the community. So that was the main reason.
I think I saw another question somewhere there. Yes. The question was whether the cuisine served will be influenced by Korean cuisine.
Well, that's kind of a question that I get asked pretty often. Maybe not necessarily specific to Korean cuisine, but it's, what kind of food are you going to serve? And it's a really difficult question to answer, and there's no really, it's not a quick answer. And it's something that I guess when you decide to open a restaurant, everyone asks you that, what kind of food are you going to serve? And when you're talking to potential investors and they say, what kind of food are you going to serve? And you give this long-winded answer, it's kind of a tough one too. But I think at a certain level of dining or a certain level of cooking, it's about a personality cuisine. And it's about offering that and reflecting that in your food, your personal experiences, the experiences of the people who work with you, the other people in the kitchen, things that you're inspired by. And unless you're doing very, very classical food, like classical Chinese cooking or classical French cooking, it's modern cooking. And modern cooking is about being influenced by everything that's going on around you. And these days, chefs are traveling, chefs are writing books, chefs are interacting in a way that they didn't do even 10 years ago. So the world's becoming smaller, certainly in the culinary world. And how can you not be influenced by all these amazing things that are going around you? So whether that inspiration comes from Korea, to answer your question, or that comes from France or Europe or America, it's not really about identifying the country that you're associated with. It's about being open to inspiration and then interpreting that for something that's unique.
I actually have a question of my own first. I noticed a lot of your presentation was devoted towards, the porcelain and the place setting. What surprised you most when you were going through this process of, opening your new restaurant that you never expected?
There's well, there's a lot of things actually. I mean, it seems like every time you climb a mountain, you get to the top, and there's a whole range behind it going through this process. There's a lot of things that I was surprised at. Certainly, working with all the city agencies is something that I had no experience with, and that's certainly a challenge. And San Francisco is notorious for being even more challenging. But it was amazing not only how many designers we worked with, as I talked about, but how many different professionals are involved. Whether it's structural engineers, architects, mechanical engineers, and they're such an important part of the process, and you really can't do it without them. That even a small restaurant, like a 66-seat restaurant that we're opening, requires all the same kind of professionals that a 500-seat restaurant would require. So it's not really about the size. And to open this little project, there are just so many people involved.
I guess a question there.
Yeah, so I just had a question in general about owning restaurants. Just so so obviously we spend a ton of time, deciding and planning for all these, extremely fine details of this restaurant. But for the days that you're not there, like for example, you can't work, 7 days a week all the time, or for example, you gave the example like Mina has 16 restaurants. How do you make sure that the restaurant maintains your personal goals for it when you can't actually be there in person?
The question was how to maintain a restaurant's, personality when the chef isn't around.
Well, for our case, is a little bit different than someone like Michael Mina, or a restaurateur of that caliber. For us, we're only going to be open 5 dinners a week when we first opened, and it was really because of that concern. We're a small restaurant, and it's hard for a new group of people to work and maintain that standard and that consistency when you're not there. So that was kind of the reason why we did that. In a case like Michael Mina or Thomas Keller or Daniel Blue, those kind of restaurateur chefs, there's a huge network of support. And at some point in Thomas's career, he was working all the time in the kitchen, and he had 15 or 20 cooks that worked with him. And over the years, those cooks began to not only understand his standard, they really started to embrace it, and also were part of reinforcing it. So it's really empowering the staff to take on more responsibility, and then eventually they can lead the rest of the staff for you, and acclimate the new people that are coming in with your own standards. So for every restaurant that Thomas has, or I'm sure Michael Mina has, there's a chef there who's probably worked with them for a long time, understands the expectations, and can reinforce them.
I think I saw another question behind there. Yes? No? Any other questions? Oh, yes, here.
You mentioned avant-garde and identified a few things that seem to be happening. There's certainly a huge high-quality food movement happening, and then I've heard about things where amazing chefs will throw unannounced parties for 6 or 10 tables at a person's home. Can you just talk about some of the emerging trends? Which ones you find most interesting, and what's been happening in the foodie movement for the past 10 years or so?
The question was trends in the culinary world.
Well, you mentioned kind of these impromptu dinners that are coming up. I think those are, I've never been to one of those, but I think as a chef I'd find that really challenging because it's hard to cook out of your restaurant. I mean, you spend so much time, energy, and resources to custom that restaurant so that you can deliver a very particular kind of experience. And when you're out of that environment and you no longer have the kitchen that was designed to do your food, or you no longer have the pieces that you're used to serving on, it's very difficult. What I find really interesting, however, is those impromptu dinners that are done by amateurs. I think that people have an interest in food, not only from an eating standpoint, from a cooking standpoint. That's kind of growing. You really see that, and that's something that you notice. Whether it's people who are buying, professional equipment for their home, or people who are taking cooking classes just for fun, and not for any kind of not to pursue any kind of professional job. But it's amazing how high the level of home cooking has become. And when we actually did a dinner with Alinea and French Laundry to celebrate the release of Eleni's book and then Under Pressure book. And there was a group of amateur cooks in New York who replicated this 14-course dinner. I mean, they bought all the equipment, all the serving pieces, and they just did it for fun out of in their house. And it's that kind of thing that I find really amazing, is that people are understanding food in a whole different way, and they actually want to participate and be interactive in that process.
What about avant-garde? What does avant-garde look like right now in the culinary world?
You know, that's something that's pretty relative. Avant-garde food, I think, for me, again, it's about being open and aware of what's going on around you. Certainly a big movement is the science behind cooking and understanding why things happen and understanding how you can achieve new things by understanding the basics. And I think that's a really important thing, and it's amazing, you know, how long cuisine has been around. It's been around forever. Well, certainly since as long as we've been around. And there's so many misconceptions about food and the science behind it. And I think that's certainly becoming kind of a prerequisite these days for chefs to really understand the science behind what they're doing.
I think there's a question there.
I know, like Thomas Keller, his attitude is that when a customer goes to French Laundry, whatever they want, he's willing to do. And then there are other people, other chefs who are like, this is my menu, and I'm not going to deviate from that. And so you were talking about having an experience when you come, when someone comes to the restaurant. So how do you fit in that system? Like, do you feel like the customer can get what they want, or do you have an experience that you want them to have and they cannot change that?
The question was whether, what's the best way to phrase this? Whether there's a sort of set, fixed experience that Corey would like to deliver, or whether it's more of a, I guess, customer-oriented experience.
You know, well, first of all, you're absolutely right about Thomas's philosophy on that, where if you come into one of his restaurants, whatever they can do, they'll do for you. And he's certainly someone who taught me the value of that. But there's actually a server at the French Laundry who's kind of as a catchphrase, and it's don't let the guests get in the way of their own experience. And I think there's some merit to that, because sure, you want to be accommodating and provide good customer service, but there are points when you need to steer the guests in a direction that whether they don't know it at the time, you have to believe that they'll enjoy it more. So as long as you're thinking about the guests and wanting to do something special for them and please them, I think that's what's really important, is kind of the motive behind that.
I have another question. So, obviously you're sort of relatively early in your career, but you have had a lot of experience in the culinary world now. What has been the greatest obstacle you've had to face to date?
I think it might be the San Francisco building department, actually. But no, I mean there's a lot of challenges. I think working in a restaurant is challenging because of the time that's involved. And it's a tough job, and it's not only tough on you, but it's tough on your family. It's tough on the people that love you and the relationships that you're in. When you're never going to have that Friday, Saturday off. You're not going to have 5 days to go on vacation in the summer. You can't get Friday afternoon off to see your niece go to kindergarten for the first day. Things like that. That's certainly been the biggest challenge. It's balancing your professional life and your private life, and it's a commitment to a lifestyle in many ways.
Are there any other questions? No? Oh, yes, one question from French.
A couple lessons that you learned in French Laundry from Thomas Keller that you're going to bring?
The question was, what are the lessons you've learned from Thomas Keller, and what will you bring from the French Laundry?
Thomas has actually taught me a lot of lessons, and a big one is the importance of your staff. And he's someone that really empowers his staff, and I think that's a big part of his success. Is that it's not about one person leading a team, it's about 30 people having the same standards that you do and reinforcing those standards to the new people that come in. Another thing is certainly a work ethic. I think he's someone who has just a tremendous work ethic and leads by that. And those two things are really kind of obvious character traits of Thomas when you work with him and you know him. But there have been a lot of lessons, and those two certainly being big ones.
Any last questions? Oh, yes, one more question here.
This is actually a typical Google interview question.
What was the biggest mistake you ever made? Apparently, it's a typical Google interview question.
I think it was not being a chef here at Google. I mean, now there's been a lot of mistakes, and you learn from those mistakes. And one thing I tell all the cooks that I work with is, no matter how good of a chef you are, or no matter how good of a cook you are, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. But what distinguishes a good cook from a bad cook is that a good cook can recognize those mistakes and then have the discipline to go back and fix them. So all those mistakes were very valuable, and as long as you're aware of them and you learn from them, I think that's the important thing.
Are there any more questions? Okay. Thank you so much, Corey, for coming here to Google. We really appreciate it.